Hey people, it's Niles Toki. Now this is from Al Jazeera. So this is Buddha in Africa, the story of Malawian Kung Fu fighter. In a Chinese Buddhist orphanage in Malawi, a teenager finds himself between African roots and a Chinese upbringing. Enoch Alu, a teenager growing up in a Chinese Buddhist orphanage in Malawi, is torn between his African identity and Chinese upbringing. Once a star performer with dreams of becoming a martial arts hero like Jet Li, Enoch has to make some tough decisions about his future. Will he return to his relatives or study abroad in China? Set against China's expanding influence on the continent, Buddha in Africa provides a unique insight into the forces of cultural soft power on the identity and imaginations of a Malawian boy and his school friends growing up between two cultures. Filmmaker's view. I first came across the story of the Chinese Buddhist orphanage while living in Malawi, producing features for an international news network, and felt it would be a fascinating lens through which to view the implication of China's involvement in Africa. At this time, Malawi and other parts of Africa were experiencing rapid influx of Chinese investment and Chinese nationals, following the formalizing of Malawi's diplomatic ties with the People's Republic. Western critics were describing it as China's colonization of the African continent or China's scramble for Africa. For many African leaders, however, the feeling was that Chinese trade investment offered a welcome alternative to a dependency on aid from the West. Malawi is one of the poorest countries in the world, is dependent upon donor aid for most of its annual budget. Former colonial powers have left countries like Malawi reeling with debt. Its new Asian partner offers trade, not aid, but will it treat Africa all that differently to how the West has? While most debate about China and Africa at the time was focused on so-called colonization of her economies and natural resources, this story shows a unique aspect of China's cultural influence on the continent. I was struck by how this orphanage was strangely reminiscent of the Christian missionaries during the colonial era, only here African children had Chinese names. Instead of learning about the West, they were learning about Chinese culture and history. I felt the orphanage would be the perfect metaphor to explore the growing relationship between China and Africa, but also a mirror of Western colonialism. As a white South African, my ancestry represents the legacy of colonialism on the continent. From this perspective, I was drawn to how this story could help me reflect on my own historical context. The story is told from the perspective of Enoch and his school friends. When I was first introduced to Enoch, I was captivated by the story of this young Malawian boy who dreamed of becoming a kung fu star like Jet Li. For so long, Africa has been influenced by Western culture, but this story showed how the influence of Chinese culture was shaping the minds and imaginations of a group of African children. I was drawn to the way this story could enable me to look at the growing China-Africa relationship, through the personal dynamics of Malawian children being raised within Chinese culture in the family-like setting of the orphanage. As one of the first generations of African children to be raised within Chinese culture, I was curious to know how this upbringing had impacted their identity, especially the younger children who came from their home villages at the age of 5 or little time to know the Malawian culture. I discovered that while Enoch at the age of 12 had already traveled extensively around the world, he held little recollection of his personal background. He did not know much about who his parents were or how his mother died, and he had never seen a photograph of his parents before. So the early stages of my filmmaking with him initiated the process of reflection into his past. As filming progressed, I was interested to see how Enoch and friends began to question their Chinese upbringing and formulate their own ideas and identities. Especially Enoch, who challenges the monk in surprising ways. Some of the reasons Enoch gives for not wanting to go to Taiwan for study to resonate with some of the questions being asked with the greater development debate. While there is the expectation from the monk for the students go overseas to gain skills and experience and then bring them back to develop the country, Enoch questions how they will be able to develop Malawi if they come back as outsiders. In many ways, I feel Enoch's internal conflict of trying to hold on to his own culture while reconciling with the sacrifices that come with embracing the opportunities afforded by the Chinese reflect the dilemma around the future of the African continent. If our identities and bonds of our communities are fractured, can we aid true development, or are we simply perpetuating the cycles of the past on a continent that has a long history of foreign conquest and domination? So please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I'll leave this article in the description. Peace.